It is the primary concern of all companies to maximize their profit. It's what they do. In order to do this, they need to get products at a low price, but they also need to pay labor less. They need to squeeze and squish down the workers, the amount that the workers get out of this process in order for them to expropriate wealth to the top and sell their product as less, or in some cases, depending on the product, if you're talking about Apple, to get the most out of it. But out of the way, it allows them to funnel profits directly to the top. One of the companies that did this was United Fruit. And it did this by using land that was in Guatemala, Honduras, and other areas of South America. But let's, for the moment, talk about Guatemala, the banana. In getting the banana, they wanted to get the banana at a cheap price. So they bought up tons of land. But not just the land, also political influence. Because they could use their dollars. They could use their dollars to essentially buy up property, but also buy politicians. In order to buy politicians, they would get those politicians to enact laws or policy in order to support the landowners, essentially them. The people finally got to the point of electing a leader that was against this and that fought for their workers' rights. This was short-lived because the CIA, working with this company, United Fruit, held a coup that took him out of power, Jacob Arbenz, in 1955, I believe. 1954. Yeah, in 1954. We didn't do this because it was in the interest of Guatemalans. We did this in the interest of this particular company and under the guise of fighting communism. Arbenz wasn't a communist. Arbenz was like a FDR lefty, but that didn't necessarily matter. The perspective that was given was this guy was a communist and we need to take this guy out of power. Same thing happened in Chile, and same thing happened in Honduras. Now, the point I'm saying this is, I often make the case that we don't regard our history honestly. There is a caravan of migrants that are coming to this country, working their way around. They're about a month and a half out. And Donald Trump has characterized these people as if they're an armed armada that are coming to take down America. It's nonsense. They're leaving countries that are poor and that have been disenfranchised based on our policies. I'm trying to get this across. The quote-unquote shithole countries are not quote-unquote shithole countries for acts of God. Oftentimes we have instigated ourselves based on military policy into various countries around the world, particularly in South America. 1954 is too far back. Let's go back to 2009. In 2009, and let's flip to the article. Hillary Clinton, or in Honduras, Zelaya was the president of that particular country. He was elected. He was a lefty, not a radical, just a lefty. Zelaya instituted, right here, let's flip over to the article, just so you can see what I'm looking at. All right. Right here. During his tenure, he raised the minimum wage and provided free school lunches, milk for young children, pensions for the elderly, and additional scholarships for students. He built new schools, subsidized public transportation, and even distributed energy-saving light bulbs. He was not a radical, but he was a lefty. Zelaya was taken out in a coup. The coup was led by General Romeo Velasquez. Now, Velasquez came out of what they call School of Assassins. Essentially, the United States training program, nicknamed the School of Assassins. He was a graduate of the notorious School of Americas. They nicknamed it School of Assassins because many of the people who came out of that were engaged in coups, torture, murder of political opponents. And in this case, a coup of a democratically elected government in Honduras. Now, since then, there have been killings, thousands of killings of indigenous protesters, peasant leaders, trade unionists, journalists, environmentalists, judges, opposition political opponents, human rights activists, since the coup ousted the democratically elected government. Hillary Clinton was in office at this time, and Hillary Clinton had an opportunity to be against this, but she was not. In her book, Hard Choices, she made a quote-unquote hard choice and called for elections. Now, mind you, this is nonsense. They've just gotten rid of the democratically elected government. But it was nonsense. Now, she had the opportunity to back and say, get rid of this. We're not going to support you if you are doing this. All of the other governments in South America wanted the democratically elected government back, but Hillary Clinton assisted in allowing or preventing Zelaya from coming back to power, restoring natural order in the sense of a democratically elected process. We instigate ourselves in policy. That's kind of the point I'm trying to get at. We, us, this country has taken certain military policies or certain policies that have created chaos in other countries. The tangible living expression of that chaos is this caravan of migrants that are trying to leave their countries for a better life. But they wouldn't have needed to leave those countries for a better life if we had stayed out of those countries back then, or followed our own supposedly U.S. policy and not support military dictatorships, especially when they depose a democratically elected government. That's what I'm trying to get across. When I say people don't regard their history honestly, I'm trying to get across that most Americans don't know this. Fair enough. But they should. Donald Trump has been screaming about this migrant caravan. Now, Donald Trump is incentivized to scream about this migrant caravan. To some degree, this is how Donald Trump got elected in the first place. And this is having consequences because there are a lot of yahoos who listen to Donald Trump. So listen to him right now. Let's flip. As he talks about this caravan of poor, starving, terrified people who just want a better life.
A large group of people, they call it a caravan. That is an assault on our country.
Remember when he first ran for president, he called Mexican immigrants rapists, criminals.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best.
We're now seeing similar logic applied to immigrants from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador.
A percentage, a fairly big percentage of those people are criminals. You got some tough people in those groups. You have some very tough criminal elements within the caravan.
Now, when I make this point, and I say Donald Trump referred to people as being rapists and drug dealers, and I assume a few of them are good people, this is nonsense logic. I mean, everybody, meaning all racial demographics, have rapists and drug dealers and criminals and all this other stuff. Assuming that a few are good people gets a certain perspective across of the individual that's saying something like that. For political effect, he's using this logic to castigate and describe a group of poor, hungry, starving people who are leaving countries to which we have instigated ourselves in our foreign affairs to the detriment of those people. It's not an act of God, it's an act of policy. As they make their way to this country, he's castigating them in this way. What Donald Trump knows is if he loses the House, he is going to have a difficult last 2 years. He's going to have a difficult last 2 years. It's having an effect. What that effect is are a bunch of yahoos gun nuts and vigilantes that decide that they're going to take up arms as militias and go and defend the border to fight for America. Now, mind you, Donald Trump has already deployed like 5,000 military units to the front lines. For the moment, let's go to Fox News' Shep Smith. Shep Smith said this better than anybody else I've heard so far. So let's let him say it.
If any of them actually come here. But tomorrow is 1 week before the midterm election, which is what all of this is about. There is no invasion. No one's coming to get you. There's nothing at all to worry about.
The majority of Fox News audience is what, between 60 to 70, some insanely high age group. He's talking to them like a child. There's nothing to worry about. There is no invasion, etc., etc. Nobody's coming to get you. We're America. We can handle it. We have $1 trillion military. You're not going to be invaded by a few migrants. And just to follow this up, finish the article itself that this is based off. Gun-carrying civilian groups and border vigilantes have heard the call to arms and President Trump's warning that there are threats to American security posed by caravan of Central American migrants moving through Mexico. They're packed with coolers, tents, oiling rifles, tuning up aerial drones, with plans to form caravans of their own and trail American troops to the border. American troops don't want them at the border. They're wild cards. The American troops worked under a particular command structure. These people are wild cards and yahoos. We'll observe and report and offer aid in any way we can, said Shannon McGauley, a bail bondsman in Dallas suburbs who is president of the Texas Minuteman. McGauley said he was preparing to head for the Rio Grande in the coming days. We proved ourselves before, we'll prove ourselves again. McGauley and others have been roused by President's call to restore order and defend the country against Trump, or what Trump calls an invasion, as thousands of Central American migrants advance slowly through the southern Mexico towards the United States border. Trump has insisted that the unknown Middle Easterners, very tough fighters, and large number of violent criminals are traveling among the women, children, and families headed on foot. Trump is making all of this up, by the way. The Texas Minutemen, according to McGauley, have 100 volunteers en route to the Rio Grande who wants to help stop migrants. With more likely on the way. Take a look at this video.
No que alguien, digamos, en frontera sur trabaje estrategias organizativas para caminar. Ellos solos decidieron salir desde su país, desde su comunidad, desde su casa hasta acá.
I graduate, yeah, you know how to speak English. Yeah, I've been there, you know. I have a lot of opportunities over the other side, and I got a lot of family that's waiting for me, and I hope to be there with them. But I think that I can go ahead and make it, you know. There's good people in the United States. There's a lot of good people, and that people will help us. That people will be our hope.
Hope is right. There are a lot of bad people too. Or at the very least people who are robots, who came up within a cultural context, who thinks that the nonsense that Donald Trump says is accurate. For the most part, we're talking about just human beings. People just like you and me. Do you honestly believe that these people would want to leave where they are, walking on foot, if the opportunities existed where they were? No, they're leaving there because they're difficult circumstances. Just like in Honduras, I keep saying it, we've instigated ourselves in these countries. These migrants are the results of our actions. It's one thing if you left these countries to their own devices and you hadn't spent the last 50, 60 years instigating yourselves into these countries, creating situations that made these countries more difficult, either through military dictatorships or destabilizing the country itself in order to put your particular person in power. But that's not the reality to which presents itself. And because that's not the reality to which it presents itself, the consequences of that, or consequence, is that people don't necessarily like to live in difficult situations and don't like to raise their kids in difficult situations. And so the situation to which they are in is worse than it would be for them to leave and walk, even if they're walking hundreds of miles, thousands of miles. I ask that you find the humanity in the individuals that are marching here. You have military supplied to the border, thousands. They're putting up barbed wire, and these gun nuts want to add themselves to this process. The military does not want them. They're talking about potentially hundreds. According to military documents obtained by Newsweek, the military is concerned about the arrival of unregulated militia members self-deploying to the border in alleged support, I like that term, alleged support, of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The assessment estimates that 200 militia members could show up. They'll operate under the guise of civilian patrols, the report said, while warning of incidents unregulated militias stealing National Guard equipment during deployments. The military report providing no further details about the alleged thefts. And yeah, they do have weapons. They ask if he has weapons. He says, "This is Texas, man." Where is that part? He said to be fair, they said they'll heed the instructions of the border or the military. We have 100 volunteers that can be ready in 148 hours. Now, interestingly enough, there are some landowners who say that they don't want, it's not necessarily that they're, love the idea of the migrants, but they hate worse this idea of militia members on their property because they consider them a threat. They consider them a wild card. "I would not let militia on my land," Krause said. "The civilians stepping into a situation where Border Patrol agents are supposed to be in control and make decisions. They could damage property or harm workers. I guess they would be trigger happy. If they shot someone, they might just say the person was reaching for a gun." That's exactly what they'll say because that's what cops say. Let's keep going. The militia needs to stay where they are, said Metz, a Republican. "We don't need fanatical people. We don't need anybody here with guns. Why do they have guns? Are you serious? I have dealt with illegals for 30 years. That gives you a perspective of where he is. He's not necessarily on the side of illegal aliens or people coming into the country. "I've dealt with illegals for 30 years, and all of them have been scared, asking for help. The militia needs to stay up north where they belong. We have no use for them. They may shoot someone or hurt someone." But there are others who don't think that way. This gentleman, Stephen T.O. Kleberg, who has lived on the land for most of his life in an 825,000 acre King Ranch outside of Kingville, said that he will allow the militia groups on his ranch, which is larger than the entire state of Rhode Island. "I think if the Caravan members get across the river, they need to be caught and sent back," said Kleberg, who wears a bushy handlebar mustache and chews an unlit cigar. "Once they get on U.S. soil, they'll need to be stopped and detained. We don't have enough Border Patrol, ICE, and Highway Patrol to handle them. If we get 2,000 or 3,000 people, we need militia." That's nonsense. We don't, especially since Donald Trump has deployed 5,000 military at the border. The chickens are coming home to roost. And instead of regarding it honestly, we send military at the border. Now, granted, Trump is incentivized based on trying to win the election, and he will use and stoke racial resentments within the country doubling down on how he got elected. Fair enough. That sucks. That's nasty politics. But that's what he's doing. We'll see if it works today. Today is election day. Stay tuned. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support through Patreon. They conquer their fear and fight even like him. I don't know what that means, what. You do not bully your way into a country. Martian Villager. Michael Moore says 78% of the people in the United States don't own a gun. How can progressives allow the police state and these racist gun nuts to be the only armed community? Progressives must get armed for defense. That's not true, by the way. The United States, I think it was like 50%, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I haven't looked at the stats, so fair enough. You do not bully your way into any country. Any other country would have cut their heads off by now. You do not bully your way into the country, period. Point blank, it's criminal behavior. Well, Mexico didn't cut the heads off of the people going to the country. No country would cut the heads off of people going to the country outside of somewhere like Saudi Arabia. Israel is stealing the land of another country. They shoot people for throwing rocks. That's them. Most countries don't do that. They just have border enforcement. I have no idea what you're talking about. You're stoned. You're on drugs. Let's see, Danny Knapp. I have a feeling I'm going to be punching things by the end of the day. I have that feeling too, Danny. I have that feeling too, Daddy. Michael Moore said it on Bill Maher's show like 2 months ago. I have to check the stat. I don't know the stat. And I could be thinking of something that one of my drivers said. He was like, you guys like guns? He said, we heard Americans like guns. 50% of Americans own guns. So that stat could be in my head. I need to check it out. All right. I'll end this here because I have other shows that I want to do today. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.